Hi everyone. Today we're going to look into the case of a mother who disappeared from her home under strange circumstances. The police started investigating and found some surprising and strange clues. They eventually figured out the truth, which shocked even experienced detectives. This case quickly became one of the most talked about in the country, as its details left everyone outraged. Teryn Grant was born on June 22, 1972 in Michigan. She spent her childhood on a farm with her parents and sister, where she enjoyed outdoor activities like riding horses and helping with the animals. In school, Teryn was highly involved in sports, participating in cheerleading, basketball, and playing in the school band. After high school, Teryn enrolled at the University of Michigan, where she met Stephen. They began dating and soon married after her graduation. Teryn pursued a business degree and landed a job at a large international company. Meanwhile, Stephen, initially aspiring to enter politics after working as a state senator's assistant in college, found himself working at his father's small tool-making shop after the senator retired. 4 years after getting married, Teryn and Stephen welcomed their first daughter, followed by a son a few years later. With the arrival of their second child, they purchased a new home in a desirable neighborhood in Maumee County, Michigan, near Detroit. Teryn had advanced in her career significantly by then, but frequent work-related travel kept her away from home, limiting her time with the family to weekends. Because Tara traveled a lot for work, Stephen had to take care of the children most of the time. His job at his father's company had flexible hours, allowing him to be there for the kids. However, managing both work and childcare was tough, so they decided to hire a full-time nanny. They used a program that helps families find live-in nannies from other countries. With Tara's good salary, they could afford this. And soon they found the perfect nanny. They hired a young woman from Germany who quickly bonded with their children and took on most of the childcare responsibilities. With more free time, Stephen also took up a part-time role as a youth soccer coach. Despite their stable financial situation, Tara's frequent absence strained her relationship with Stephen. She was only home on weekends, leading to more frequent arguments between them. Tara looked forward to a future promotion that might allow her to adjust her schedule and spend more time at home. Until then, her busy schedule kept her away on business trips almost daily. On February 14, 2007, Stephen made a startling call to the police. He reported that Tara had been missing for 5 days, which was highly unusual. Stephen explained that on the evening of February 9th, Tara returned from a business trip and abruptly announced she had to leave a day earlier than planned, sparking an argument between them. As Tara packed her suitcase, Stephen overheard her on the phone saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street." Shortly after, Tara left in a dark-colored car, and since then, she had not been in contact and did not respond to any of his calls. The police's first question was why Stephen waited 5 days before reporting her disappearance. Stephen explained that initially, he didn't think there was a reason to worry. He believed Tara had left early for her business trip and wasn't responding to his calls due to their argument. However, as days passed without any contact from Tara, he grew increasingly concerned. Normally, when she traveled, she would call their young children, aged 3 and 7, but this time, there had been no communication from her. On Monday, Tara's boss called Stephen to inform him that she had missed a meeting, which was highly unusual and indicated she hadn't gone to work. Concerned, Stephen reached out to Tara's relatives and explained the situation. However, they speculated that Tara might have needed some time away from the frequent arguments with Stephen. She had previously confided in her parents about their increasingly troubled relationship due to her demanding job, leading to frequent disputes. Therefore, her relatives assumed she had chosen to take a break from Stephen and anticipated her return home soon. As days passed without any sign of Tara and no response to calls, Stephen grew increasingly concerned about her well-being. Eventually, he became worried that something serious might have happened to her and took the step of contacting the police. During the police questioning, detectives observed several suspicious scratches on Stephen. They inquired whether the argument with his wife had escalated to physical confrontation, but Stephen denied any such occurrence. Stephen explained that the scratches were from his work with metal parts at his father's shop, where such incidents were common. Following the interview at the police station, detectives requested to search their home, to which Stephen consented. Upon their arrival, they discovered that all of Tara's belongings, including her documents, purse and suitcase, were missing. Stephen also allowed them access to Tara's computer, where they examined her bank account. Detectives noted a lack of transactions since her disappearance, which struck them as unusual. Typically, if she had traveled somewhere, there would have been activity such as purchasing plane tickets or booking accommodations, but there was no such activity in her account for the past 5 days. During the house search, detectives found no clues to explain Tara's disappearance. There were no signs suggesting she had been a victim of a crime, leaving investigators to focus on tracing her movements since February 9th. The local police department had limited experience with such cases, as the area was known for its safety, typically handling minor neighbor disputes and other non-violent incidents. They requested Stephen to take a polygraph test, which angered him as he vehemently denied any involvement and broke down in tears. The police left his residence to plan their next move. The next morning, Stephen unexpectedly called them, expressing readiness for interrogation. Shortly after, his lawyer contacted the detectives, advising against it. The police focused on Stephen, Tara's husband, as the primary person of interest, following standard procedure in such cases and due to the lack of other leads. Tara's relatives, friends and colleagues confirmed they hadn't heard from her since February 9th and had no information about her whereabouts. Additionally, there was no activity on her bank account, despite the likely need for purchases. Detectives strategized on how to approach Stephen for interrogation and discovered an intriguing detail. His driver's license had been revoked, yet he continued to drive. They waited until he got behind the wheel and arrested him. However, Stephen perceived this as further suspicion and declined to cooperate with the police. His lawyer promptly secured his release, and Stephen returned home without providing any statements. The police continued their search for clues and obtained Tara's mobile phone records. They discovered that her last call was made on the day she disappeared. She phoned Stephen from the airport, informing him she would be returning home soon. Following this call, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach her, leaving several voicemails. In these messages, he urged her to respond, expressed concern for their children, and pleaded for her to come back home. The phone itself was later found turned off, and based on data from the cell phone carrier, it was last connected to cell towers near Tara's house on the evening she went missing. Interestingly, the police noted that there were no incoming calls during that critical period. Previously, Stephen had mentioned that someone called Tara just before she left home, indicating that they would meet her on the street. Despite this, from the voicemails detectives listened to, Stephen's concern for his wife was evident. He expressed genuine worry about Tara's well-being and frustration over her absence, especially concerning their children. Although detectives did not dismiss Stephen as a suspect, they also failed to uncover any new leads. Stephen persisted in refusing to cooperate with the police, accusing them of focusing on him instead of actively searching for Tara. Instead, he turned to the media, which began reporting on the case soon after Tara's disappearance. The public's interest grew rapidly, and Stephen frequently appeared on camera, appealing for Tara's safe return. When the company that provided Stephen and Tara with the nanny learned about the case, they decided to send her back to Germany. Before her departure, she cooperated with the police, providing a statement about her time in their home. She recalled being at a bar with friends on the evening Tara returned, and upon coming back she found Stephen visibly upset, who informed her that Tara had just left the house. Despite Stephen's reluctance to assist the police, he hired a private detective, a former FBI agent, to conduct his own investigation, which also failed to locate Tara. Facing a lack of leads, the police adopted a new strategy. They contacted the company through which Tara and Stephen hired the nanny, uncovering an intriguing detail. Before settling on the German nanny, they had employed a total of 6 nannies, none of whom stayed long in the position. Detectives interviewed them, and nearly all expressed discomfort with Stephen's behavior, describing it as not only odd but also intimidating. They reported incidents of him searching through their personal belongings, asking intrusive questions and frequently raising his voice at them, as if expecting unquestioned compliance. The police were puzzled by why the German nanny painted a positive picture of her time with the family, despite previous nannies' concerns about Stephen's behavior. They obtained permission to monitor her communications and discovered messages between her and Stephen exposing their affair. It became clear that the 19-year-old had been romantically involved with him while Tara was away on business trips, continuing until she left the country. While the discovery of the affair provided a lead, it didn't confirm Stephen's role in Tara's disappearance. Detectives pursued other leads by interviewing Tara's relatives and friends, who expressed long-standing dislike towards Stephen since his marriage to her. They described his controlling behavior and strained relationships with Tara's family, suggesting a troubled dynamic that raised suspicions. Investigators soon uncovered another significant detail. Stephen's former girlfriend, whom he had dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police with surprising information. She revealed that Stephen had initiated contact with her several months earlier, and their conversations had grown increasingly intimate over time. Eventually, Stephen confessed his desire to pursue a romantic relationship with her, despite both being married. He also expressed frustrations about Tara, citing her frequent absences. Stephen suspected Tara of infidelity with her boss and admitted to installing monitoring software on her computer to check her messages, though he found no evidence to support his suspicions. All of this heightened the police's suspicion regarding the husband's role in Tara's disappearance, yet they lacked concrete evidence. As weeks passed without any sign of Tara, they started contemplating the grim possibility that she might not be alive. Extensive searches were conducted, involving volunteers scouring the vicinity around Tara's home and a nearby large park within a several-mile radius. Despite several days of searching, they found no trace of her. On February 28th, a local resident alerted the police. Aware of Tara's disappearance and the ongoing search, she was walking in the park when she noticed something unusual under a tree along the trail. Covered with branches and snow, a plastic bag caught her attention. Curious, she inspected it closely. Inside the bag, she observed rubber gloves and what appeared to be metal shavings. At the bottom, there was a dark red substance. She decided to take the bag and delivered it to the police. Detectives promptly suspected that the red substance could be blood and sent the bag to the lab for analysis. However, there was a problem. Experts cautioned that DNA analysis might be delayed by up to 2 months due to their heavy workload. Despite this, they scrutinized the contents and verified that the substance appeared to be human blood. The police swiftly concentrated their search in the vicinity where the bag was discovered, mobilizing all their resources. Stephen opted out of joining the search, claiming prejudice from the police. Instead, he granted an extensive interview to a news channel, during which he made several contentious remarks. He consistently blamed Tara for her frequent absence from home, accusing her of being an inadequate mother. Stephen asserted that he assumed nearly all parental duties and asserted he was a better mother than Tara. When questioned about their financial status and whether he relied heavily on Tara's income, Stephen grew enraged and vehemently denied needing a penny from her. Throughout the interview, Stephen also alleged Tara's infidelity without presenting any proof. He consistently criticized Tara and underscored the challenges he faced in their marriage. As Stephen gave the interview, detectives made headway. Previously stymied in their efforts to secure a search warrant for Tara's home due to insufficient grounds, Stephen had declined voluntary searches. However, following the discovery of the blood-stained bag in the park, the judge approved the warrant. The police arrived at the house just as Stephen returned from the interview. Detectives informed him of the search warrant, and Stephen allowed them entry before calling his lawyer. The lawyer asked if Stephen was under arrest, to which the police replied no. Stephen then mentioned he would take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from inside the house, and departed while the police commenced their search. They went through the house room by room, eventually reaching the garage. There, one of the detectives noticed a large green container with several plastic bags inside. Slitting one open, they found an unknown substance, along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the officer realized with horror that it likely contained human remains. In total, there were 5 bags in the container, and the detectives quickly confirmed that they indeed contained the remains of a woman. The police realized that they had found Tara's body and Stephen must be her murderer. However, Stephen had not returned, prompting an immediate police search for him. There was concern that he might flee or pose a threat to others, given the likelihood of imminent imprisonment. Meanwhile, additional officers were summoned to intensify the search in the park. Since only a portion of Tara's remains were recovered from the garage, over 100 officers from nearby districts joined the effort. Their concerted efforts yielded results swiftly. Several hundred yards from where the initial bag was found, they located another part of the body and later discovered the head. Due to the cold temperatures, Tara's remains were well preserved, facilitating detectives in confirming her identity. They discovered several additional body parts, suspending the search as night fell. To resume in the morning, simultaneously, detectives pursued Stephen's whereabouts without success. Contacting his friends, they learned that Stephen had called one of them, disclosing the police search at his home and requesting pickup from the street. Stephen's friend drove him to his home, observing Stephen's unusual behavior during the ride. Stephen appeared frightened, with trembling hands, giving the impression that he was on the brink of an emotional breakdown. Upon reaching the friend's house, Stephen expressed a strong desire to see his children and requested to borrow the friend's car. At that moment, Stephen's children were in another state, being cared for by his sister. The friend gave him his pickup truck and Stephen left. Police requested information on Stephen's phone and credit card activity, enabling them to track his route. They discovered Stephen had made multiple cash withdrawals as he traveled towards a neighboring state, prompting them to contact his sister. Realizing Stephen was heading to his children, the police swiftly set off in pursuit. Then something unexpected happened. The police received a call from Germany, from the very nanny with whom Stephen had had a romantic relationship. She told them that Stephen had just called her and confessed to killing Tara. According to him, they indeed had an argument that evening, and Stephen started yelling at her. Tara then slapped him in the face and he flew into a rage. He pushed her, and Tara hit her head after falling on the floor, resulting in her death. The police were now convinced of Stephen's involvement, but their immediate priority was locating him. They spent several hours searching the area along the highway to the neighboring state. Eventually, they found Stephen's friend's car abandoned near the entrance to the national park, but Stephen himself was nowhere to be found. The police entered the park and after several hours of searching with thermal cameras, eventually located Stephen. He was found lying under a tree, dressed lightly, and showing signs of hypothermia. Stephen appeared disoriented, speaking to trees and mumbling unintelligibly. The officers promptly airlifted him to the hospital due to his critical condition. Despite his body temperature dropping to just 88 degrees Fahrenheit, doctors successfully saved Stephen's life, though it took some time for him to fully recover. While in the hospital, Stephen was charged with murder, and detectives transferred the case to the court. Interestingly, on the same day, his lawyer refused to defend Stephen, vaguely stating, "I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror in the mornings." As a result, Stephen was assigned a new lawyer. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of Tara's remains. One of the most experienced pathologists in the country, known for his work on high-profile cases like JFK and John Bennett Ramsey, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After careful study, he determined that Stephen's account of events did not align with the evidence. Stephen had asserted that Tara died from a head injury, but the forensic analysis revealed that the actual cause of death was strangulation. When Stephen finally regained consciousness, detectives went to see him in the hospital. He told them what really happened that evening. According to him, when Tara came home and said she had to leave a day earlier, they got into an argument and he started yelling at her. When she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her. Tara hit him in the face. Enraged, Stephen struck back, then strangled her. He dragged her body from the second floor to the garage and placed Tara in the trunk of her car. At the same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen told her that his wife had just left him. The next morning, he took the body to his father's workshop, making sure no other workers would be there. Stephen destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, then dismembered her body using a saw. He also mentioned that he vomited twice while doing all this, but he kept telling himself, "If you don't do this, you'll end up in prison for the rest of your days." Several hours later, he packed the remains into plastic bags, placed them in a container, and returned home. Leaving the body in the car for a few days, he'd been thinking how to dispose of the remains while creating an alibi for himself. He repeatedly called Tara and left messages on her voicemail, begging her to come home. One day, he took his children's snow sled to the park where he had hidden the bags containing Tara's remains. There, he placed the container on the sled to move it away from busy areas and started pulling it up a hill. Suddenly, the rope slipped from his hands, causing the sled to roll downhill and overturn the container, spilling the bags. Hurriedly, Stephen collected the bags, put the container back on the sled, and later buried the remains under remote snow-covered areas before heading home. A few days later, as the police launched their search for Tara in the park, Stephen grew anxious. He remembered one of the bags, the largest, was poorly hidden and feared it would be discovered soon. Acting quickly, he walked to the park, slung a few bags over his shoulder, and carried them to his father's workshop, leaving them on the roof. The day prior to his interview, he took the container from his house, transported it to the workshop, retrieved the bags, and returned them to his garage. The following day, police obtained a search warrant for the house and discovered the bags in the container. Stephen then confessed that when his guilt became undeniable, he had initially planned not to surrender alive. However, he failed to carry out his plan and survive, despite nearly freezing to death. During his conversation with the police, Stephen displayed no remorse. On the contrary, he frequently smiled and joked, even when recounting how he disposed of the body. While Stephen awaited trial in prison, his children remained in the care of his sister. However, Tara's family expressed dissatisfaction with this setup. Despite Stephen's sister maintaining communication with him, expressing sympathy, and even making light-hearted remarks about Tara's murder, Tara's relatives persisted in their efforts. Eventually, they succeeded in having the children placed with Tara's sister, though Stephen's family retained visitation rights. The trial commenced in November 2007. While Stephen did not contest his guilt, his new lawyer argued for a reduced sentence, citing the crime occurring after years of marital strife due to his wife's frequent absences. During the trial, it was revealed that Stephen had fabricated Tara's intention to leave a day earlier. According to Tara's boss, she had no additional meetings scheduled and was expected to begin work at her usual time. This was corroborated by Tara's sister, who had spoken with her shortly before the murder. Tara had informed her that she would be home all weekend as usual. There was no evidence to substantiate the allegation that Tara was cheating on her husband. Her boss confirmed their relationship was strictly professional, supported by their email exchanges and texts. Stephen himself admitted he didn't genuinely believe it. The prosecution couldn't establish that Stephen had premeditated the murder. It appeared he acted in a moment of rage, which might have warranted charges of second-degree murder rather than first-degree. On December 21, 2007, Stephen was unanimously found guilty by the jury and sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict without success. Since then, Stephen has been serving his sentence behind bars, but that wasn't the end of his story. Tara's murder captured the nation's attention, drawing millions of eyes. Stephen, while in prison, took to writing a book and sought his sister's help to publish it. They even entertained ideas of a potential film adaptation, with Stephen contemplating which famous actor would portray him. In 2008, another revelation emerged. Stephen's children confided in their aunt, disclosing that they had witnessed their father killing their mother on that tragic evening. They had come out of their room upon hearing screams and observed the entire incident. When this information surfaced in the media, Stephen's relatives dismissed the children's account as lies and staunchly stood by his defense. Also in the same year, it was revealed that Stephen's father, unlike other relatives, could not bear to live with what his son had done. His body was found in his own home. As of now, Stephen remains behind bars, and he will only be eligible for parole in 2058. Every year, Tara's relatives and friends host a marathon along the route in the park, where she used to jog frequently. Her children are always among the participants. Despite their father's actions, they have found the strength to move forward and honor their mother's memory. Feel free to share your thoughts on this story in the comments section. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.